If Anthony
Yeah.
could tell us anything today, it would be make the most of this day. Love your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, your family, your church family. Spend time with them. You're never going to regret investing in relationships.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Franklin, and this is a show where we help you learn and master the skills you need to grow your leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified as soon as I post a new session so you don't miss a single episode. And before we get started, I do want to mention the Christian Leader Blueprint. It's a solid model for leadership development to help you and your team establish a better rhythm of life, to see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and to build more productive relationships. And I have that in two formats now. I have a free short guide that you can find on ryanfranklin.org, and I have a brand new book, The Christian Leader Blueprint. You can find that on Amazon or wherever you buy books, and I'll put a link in the show notes for you. One thing I do want to mention, and I'm really excited about this, just a few weeks ago, I launched my brand new Christian Leader Community Coaching Program. And anyone who joins in the month of October will receive the founding member badge. And in an effort to sort of reward my existing audience, I'm offering to you for a short time a lifetime 40% discount until October 31st, or the first 50 members that join, whichever comes first. And so I encourage you, head on over to ryanfranklin.org. There's a detailed webpage on everything that the community offers, along with links to join. And I would absolutely love for you to check it out. And while you're there, you can pick up the Christian Leader Blueprint short guide for free. And I've got some other free things there as well that you may be interested in. And so without any further delay, let's get to our session. I'm so excited today to have on the podcast a close friend of mine, Michael Ensey. This is the second time that he's been on the show this year, and he's actually the only repeat guest so far, so he's a pretty special guy. Let me give you a brief introduction to Michael. He's the senior pastor of Christian Life Center in Heath, Ohio, where he has served for over 5 years now. He is also the chairman of the board for Urshan College and Urshan Graduate School of Theology, and the secretary for the UPCI Office of Education and Endorsement. And there's probably more things there that I'm missing. But prior to his pastorate, he served for 15 years in organizational leadership, 8 of those years as the youth ministries as a youth ministries executive for UPCI, including the national youth president for 4 years. He has a bachelor's degree in theology from Texas Bible College and a master's degree in theology from UGST. And most importantly, he is the husband of a tremendous wife, Rebecca, and the father of Lincoln, Grant, and Avery. And so, Michael, welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It is truly an honor to be back on the podcast with you. It was a high honor to be with you the first time, and really special to be back on the show. I absolutely love what you're doing in the leadership space. Certainly the book that you launched this year, community coaching, incredible resources. So thank you for all that you're doing. And I appreciate your friendship and just the opportunity to be on with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for those kind words. So we're here today to talk about a very specific subject. It's a new book called Coffee with Anthony, Life Lessons with Anthony Trimble. And this book is written about a pretty special guy. I did not know him personally, but a pretty special guy to you and many, many others, Anthony Trimble. So can you kind of kick us off by telling us about him and the road that he walked and how you decided to write and compile other writers' writings of this book to form this book?
Absolutely. It's a privilege to be able to talk about this book. We're very excited to have this resource now available, written somewhat in the context of a biography, but something that I believe is very applicable to anybody who just wants to be better and do better when it comes to life and family and ministry. I got to know Anthony really when he was a teenager. His father and family were traveling, ministering at youth events. I was involved in organizational leadership, youth ministry. And so as his father was ministering, Anthony was a teenager and was partnering with his father in ministry. And you could just tell from a very early age that he was a very special guy, that the hand of God was upon him, that he had a certain focus and a certain commitment, even as a teenager, that was rare. And so over the years, our lives continued to intersect. And when we moved to St. Louis in December of 2009, and that's where he lived, his father pastors a church, Restoration Church, St. Charles, Missouri, then Anthony really was very intentional to reach out to me and to create opportunities for us to get together. And so we became friends. And as time went on, then he got into organizational youth ministry, and it created more opportunities for us to work together. And then along the way, his story really changed. As a young father with 3 children, married to Lysandra, and right about the age of 30, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And it started him down a path that seemed to change his life story in so many ways. But it was during that season that we really saw the very best of Anthony. He didn't blame life or God or circumstances. He really narrowed his focus even more. And he would battle cancer for almost 6 years before passing away 2 years ago.
Wow.
And in those last 6 years of his life, it was really incredible to watch him stay focused on mission and relational investment and continue to make a difference in the world, literally through the testimony of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an inspirational thing to behold. And so through the course of our relationship before his diagnosis and even after, we would get together for coffee, and we would just meet and we would talk. And that increased even more with the diagnosis, and every chance that we had, we would get together. And we just had a special connection. I was older than him, maybe 8 or 9 years older than him, so was just ahead of him in life in many ways. But we had this special bond and friendship, and it created a lot of opportunities for us to really develop that relationship. And about a year before he passed away, he told me, "I'm going to write a book titled Coffee with Michael." And he said it's based on this concept of the book Tuesdays with Maury, which is a story about a student who reconnected with a professor who was diagnosed with a terminal illness. In the last year of his life, they started meeting weekly on Tuesdays. And he shares in the book that was the greatest classroom and greatest interaction that he had with his professor, and learned so much in those sessions. And so Anthony said, "I want to write a book to express appreciation to the friends, the family, the people that have been here for me during this sickness." And so it was probably a year before he passed that he shares that with me. Well, time goes on, and I was with Anthony about a week before he passed, and we're having a very, very serious, intense conversation. He knows that the end is imminent. And in the context of that conversation, he starts to apologize to me and tell me, "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never got around to writing the book." And so I said, "Anthony, that's okay." And really in an attempt to console him, I said, "Anthony, I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to call it Coffee with Anthony. And it's going to be about the difference that you've made in my life and others." And I really, in that moment, I said it. I don't think I really thought it through. I just expressed it to him. I ended up sharing that whole conversation at Anthony's memorial service. And so I said it publicly, and I felt like it was important that I share that. But having said it publicly, I knew this is something I have to do. I'm going to be held accountable to this story that I've shared in those last days of Anthony's life. And so it became something very personal and important to me. And I invited additional family members and friends to join with me. So there's 10 different chapters that are written by different individuals, different perspectives. And as the subtitle you've already mentioned declares, life lessons from Anthony Trimble. And so each chapter focuses on these different life principles that we can apply, that we all discovered from Anthony's life. And so really, not only is Anthony's life the inspiration for the content of the book, he is literally the inspiration for the book. He's the one who first mentioned it. And I'm going to go ahead and play spoiler just a little bit, because as we were completing the manuscript, really it was done. Lysandra, Anthony's wife, emailed me and she said, I found something that I think you're going to want, and it may be something that could be used in the book. And she emails me this document. Anthony had started writing the book. And so we took what Anthony wrote, and that became the introduction for this book. So my introduction that I had written became the preface, and Anthony wrote his own introduction to this book. And it really provides a powerful context for all of those life lessons that you then read about from the perspective of others.
Yeah, isn't that special? That's a tremendous thing. And just for all transparency, I have bought the book, but I have not read the book. It just came out. We're recording this the day after it came out, so I have bought it on Kindle, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it and reading it. So just in our conversations, you have told me just how much he built and nurtured relationships, how intentional that he was about building and nurturing relationships. And I would assume that that's why there's 10 people that can write a whole chapter, probably much more than that, but can write a chapter and put it in a book form like this. So can you share maybe, some specific examples of how he was such an intentional person in building and nurturing relationships?
Absolutely. I'll give you the layout of the book because I feel like it helps to explain the context and the focus, what we were trying to communicate with this book, which, number one, the title itself, Coffee with Anthony, absolutely speaks of relationships, having coffee with people. It's something that we do culturally. We get together, we meet, we have coffee. We see this in every community throughout North America, around the world, people interacting over coffee. And it speaks of investment and connection and community. And so in the book, there's 3 parts. Vision and values is number 1, then relational investment is part 2, and then kingdom impact is part 3. And so vision and values is all about who Anthony was. And so talks about priority, purpose, purity, and progress, and the life lessons that he taught us, the value of a well-defined life, the value of personal investment, the value of a pure heart, the value of optimal behavior. So it kind of talks about who he was, what his focus was, how intentional he was in life. Part 2 is relational investment. He taught us how to value people, how to focus on others, and how to mentor a friend. So those are life lessons: love, listen, and lead. And then part 3, kingdom impact, is about him as a wordsmith, a worshiper, and a world changer. And the lessons that he taught us about the power of the pen, the power of worship, and the power of music. And so through each of these different parts of the book, you see this intentional investment that Anthony made in all of these different relationships. His siblings each wrote a chapter. So his brother Ryan, his sister Stephanie, and it was really special for them to be part of this project because that's a perspective that none of the rest of us had. And so they're writing from almost this sibling yet friend perspective. It's really powerful. And then the other individuals that were involved, some were a little bit older than him, some a little bit younger, but you saw how he was able to connect with different generations. And that I think that the most important key that came out of it for me, and even reading those other chapters, is how intentional he was. And there were so many individuals that maybe they thought that they were one of a really small select few that had that kind of relationship with Anthony, where he's getting together and having coffee with him. I think just through this book, we realized there's at least 10, and there are probably dozens more that Anthony
Probably
was
many more.
connecting with, whether many, many more, whether he was wanting to glean something from them, or wanting to invest in them.
Yeah. So from what I understand, Anthony is was a pretty busy person with his professional life, with all of the things that he had, irons in the fire that he had. But he seemed to always prioritize those relationships with family and with friends over. He'd get significant stuff done, but he would prioritize those relationships. In your opinion, how did he ensure that the relationships were kept first and foremost and accomplish significant things in life?
I think with Anthony, what's important to recognize is that his diagnosis and his sickness did not create this intentional focus in his life. It really revealed the character that was already there. And I think that's probably
Mm.
true for most people when they deal with any kind of trauma, or they experience significant, what could be perceived as negative circumstances in their life, that most often it's not really producing something in them, but it's revealing what is already there. And I think that was the case with Anthony, that he was an incredible guy before the diagnosis. He was so genuine.
Mm.
He was a high character, high capacity individual. And the diagnosis that he received only magnified what was already there. And I think a lot of us begin to take a closer look because of what he was going through, and then to see how he handled it, and also how
Mm-hmm.
Lysandra handled it, standing by her man, was so inspirational and encouraging. And I think the way that Anthony mastered that ability of being very productive in ministry and in life and in a professional sense, while also balancing family, balancing those important relationships, is that his entire life focus and purpose revolved around people. His vision was not to produce a product, to preach a message, to sing a song. His vision was to minister to
Yeah.
people, to impact people, to invest in people. And so, no matter what he was doing, he never got lost in the project or lost in the minutia of organizational work, because people were always his focus. It was always his end goal. And so he was able to stay very connected to his family, and the Trimble family. They're just an amazing family, and just very talented, anointed, powerful, incredible people. And he stayed very, very grounded with them and his church family at Restoration Church, and his very closest friends. And so I think him keeping people as his purpose, and his vision always
Mm-hmm.
being impacting a life, that enabled him to balance all of the other things that he was involved in. And we haven't really
Yeah.
mentioned, I guess, that part of it, but he was on a pastoral team, and he was in organizational leadership and youth ministry in Missouri. He was a songwriter, singer, an incredible worship leader. And
Mm-hmm.
so he was involved in all of those things and recording music. In fact, some of his greatest songs were recorded in the last few years of his life. Some powerful projects.
Yeah.
And so, again, just I believe that diagnosis and the challenges he faced revealed the character, the intentional focus that he had.
And so I'm also hearing from you. You started off by saying that he's a really high capacity person. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that the relationship part of, prioritizing the relationships actually is what allowed him to be a high capacity leader, or a high capacity person in general, whether it was leading or music or anything else in his life. That was the thing
Yeah.
that sort of fueled him. It was sort of what Dr. John Townsend says: people fuel. It fueled him to
Yeah.
be able to be a high impactor of people, and and produce some significant things in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was very, very
So
intentional in those relationships. I believe were everything to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were a mentor to Anthony in some ways. You were kind of a few years ahead of him in life and in a different stage of life. And so he looked to you as a mentor. Can you elaborate on how Anthony allowed his mentors, and I'm sure he had several, but to influence his personal and professional development?
Absolutely. I think Anthony had a tremendous sense of self-awareness that is probably rare, that
Mm-hmm.
he knew he needed others. He knew areas in his life where he wanted to improve. Uh, he recognized the value of those that were around him that he could glean from and mentors in his life. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that self-awareness was a powerful thing, that he could have that and not be threatened by that area of need in his life, not allow insecurities to keep him from expressing a need. He asked incredible questions. He had this ability to, it just seems like, to ask the right question to get the right information. And I think sometimes we applaud people who have the right answers, but I think part of Anthony's genius was in his ability to ask the right questions. There was something about him that he could draw out of people things that
Yeah.
he needed, that would help him, that would benefit him, and he had a certain analytical mind in that sense. And so uh, I think that's a key to why those relationships were so effective in his life, because we can
Yeah.
all be around great people, but not necessarily draw out of those people things that we needed. And yet I think he did it in a way that as you know, and perhaps being a mentor in his life, and I think he probably would have said that. And yet I felt like I was getting just as much, if not more, benefit out of the relationship. And so I never felt like it was draining to me. I felt like it was so mutually beneficial. And I think Anthony had a
Yeah.
way about him that whether he was mentoring someone or he was being mentored by someone, that it never felt like it was a drain. You know, I would never
Mm-hmm.
leave having coffee with Anthony feeling drained or like, you know, he's pulled something out of me and now I need to go be recharged. No, it was always encouraging and inspiring. And certainly through those last couple of years with his diagnosis and days when he wasn't doing well, I know there were times that he felt terrible, and yet he had put a suit on because he knew I was going to be in a suit. And later he would tell me that was the only reason he put a suit on that day. He'd go home and take the suit off. He didn't need the suit on, but he knew I'd be dressed up going to the office, would grab coffee, and I always left more encouraged and inspired and challenged. And he's thanking me for the time for investing when I felt like I was the one that was really receiving the
Yeah.
greatest benefit.
I just want to pull out something right there. Um, and you were saying it in a very polite way, but he was being needy and in a
Yeah.
good way. And I want to
Yeah.
make the point of it's okay to be needy. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to need help from people. And I think it's important that it's the right people, safe people in your life. But it's okay to um, seek things, even advice or relational nutrients of some sort from other individuals. And I want to point out that you, as I would consider maybe the mentor in that relationship. He would definitely consider that you were the mentor in that relationship, but you were receiving just as much from that. Um, and I think we underestimate the power of being needy sometimes because we don't want
Yeah.
to be labeled as needy. Yet it's an important aspect of life. So,
Absolutely.
in what ways did Anthony mentor others? Because I know there was people that he invested in significantly. So, in what ways did he mentor others, and how did this impact their growth, their success from your research and your talk with him and with others since his passing?
There's a great chapter in the book, and it's in that relational investment part number 2, where a friend of his would write this chapter, How to Mentor a Friend. And it's really powerful because Anthony had that ability, even in peer relationships. And I think that can get a little tricky at times, where maybe it's a peer-to-peer situation or somebody just a little younger than you. He had this ability to mentor them without it feeling like he was mentoring them. It just felt like it was a good relationship, a good friendship. And I think some of them, looking back on it later, realized he was mentoring me, and I didn't realize it at the time, because it didn't feel like he was lecturing me. It just felt like he was investing in me and in our relationship. And so I think that's a powerful lesson for all of us in our demeanor, I think, and how we come across that. I don't want, those around me to feel like I'm lecturing them in some kind of mentorship type relationship, but can we add relational value in this friendship, especially when it's a peer-to-peer relationship, or maybe somebody just a little younger? And it was never a competition thing with those that were around him. And I think that just, again, it speaks to a certain security that he had in who he was, in self-awareness, that he knew he didn't have it all together. He didn't have all the answers, and that he could learn something from somebody else. And if he could help somebody, he was going to be more than willing and ready to do that.
Yeah, it wasn't like a one up, one down type of relationship. It's just getting coffee with Anthony, relationship building, and through that he would invest in their lives. Just as, even though you may have been a mentor, you may have been a few years ahead of him in his life, he still invested in you in some ways, even as you interacted with him. So you don't invest, or you don't seek out mentor relationships or seek out to mentor people without really having you don't do that without having a strong commitment to personal growth and the desire to want to grow and develop yourself in daily life and decision making. And I would imagine that was probably a high driver for him, having these conversations with people that maybe were mentoring him, or vice versa. So why do you feel like that this was important, and how did Anthony maintain his commitment to that?
Absolutely. He was very committed to personal growth, to improving himself. He was always asking, what books are you reading? What's your favorite book this year? And he would get book recommendations from me, and I'm sure many other friends and mentors and others that he would talk to, because he was always buying books for his team, whether it's his local church ministry leadership team or the district organizational youth ministry team. He was always buying books for people and just trying to find out, what is the latest, greatest leadership principle that I need to add to my life, to my arsenal, and that my team needs to employ. And so we talked tons of leadership, and he loved doing that. He would bring me in several times that I spoke to his team, and he would always have someone investing in his team, in local youth ministry, local church, the district. And so those were things that absolutely drove him to better himself, but also to better those that are around him at the different stages of his life. And he would absolutely have loved what you're doing, Ryan. I think the Christian Leader Blueprint, the community coaching, all those things that you're doing, Anthony absolutely would have eaten it up. He just, it's the kind of stuff that really inspired and drove him. There was a way that he could make himself better, and that he could better those around him. And it just seemed to be a constant focus in his life, that desire for growth.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's not a given for people. Not everybody has that passion for growth. In fact, I'm finding more and more that it's sort of a rare trait that people would have a passion for growth. And I'm on a mission to help people increase that within themselves, because we need to grow. We need to continue throughout life growing and developing ourselves, developing our character, developing our abilities. And I think that brings us to the next question that I want to ask you about, and that's excellence. Anthony really had a passion for excellence that's very evident. So, what practical steps? I guess, how did he impact excellence, first of all, in the environments that he was in, and then what practical steps can leaders that may be listening to this take to sort of cultivate a similar passion for excellence in their own lives and work?
Well, he certainly had an eye for excellence and this certain sense. And I think it's something that can be developed. I think he certainly had some innate abilities that were just there, something that made him very special. And so he had this sense for doing things with excellence. And I think probably the greatest key, he was such a team builder, and he always elevated the outcomes of those that were around him, the team that he was part of. They were always better because of his involvement. And if it was recording a song, it was the singers and songwriters and musicians that were with him. If it was on a youth ministry team, those that were serving in various capacities at an event or in the local church, a worship service, or organizational leadership, he just elevated the effort and the impact of those around him, which has exponential power and potential when you're talking about doing things with excellence, because none of us by ourselves can really do anything with excellence. It's going to take a team. And so he saw that, he recognized that, and he just made everybody else around him better. And it seemed to be a constant focus for him again, along with personal growth, was this passion for excellence and asking the right questions and how can we do this better, and not being stuck in a rut of this is the way we've always done it. But if we can do it in a different way and the outcome is better, then let's do that. Let's go for it. And it was such a focus. This is a story that I shared in his memorial service, and it was just amazing to me. It drove home the point so powerfully. Once again, I preached there at Restoration Church in St. Charles about 2 weeks before Anthony passed. And I'd come in to spend a few days with him, and he had been wanting me to come and to preach, and he wanted to be there that day. He ended up not being able to make it in person because he just wasn't feeling well enough to be there. And so him and Lysandra watched the service online. And then later that day, I was spending some time with him. He had gotten a room at the same hotel where I was staying there, just so we'd be able to spend a little bit more time together. It'd be easier on him. He wouldn't have to travel, go back and forth. And so we're sitting in his hotel room and we're talking, and here we are. I mean, we are literally in the last days of his life. And he starts to ask me about the church service that day. What did you think about the platform setup? What did you think about the worship service flow? What did you think about our guest relations? He's asking me all these questions. How can we do things better? I want you to watch the live stream with me. What can we do to make this more effective? It was something that simply was this consuming passion than anything he was part of. He wanted to make it better. And he's asking me all of these questions. He wanted my input, my feedback. And in the course of that, he asked, he's like, hey, do you think you could tell my dad and ask him if he could shorten the preliminaries just a little bit? Just he gets a little too long-winded in between worship songs. And so it was amazing. I'm just sitting there blown away that, Anthony, you're focused on all of these things. I just want to sit here and talk to you and talk about you. And he's worried about their worship service being as effective as it can be. That was his passion for excellence.
Yeah, that was his passion. And tying that into relationships and growth, he understood that it took a team to make things excellent. He also understood that there was growth that needed to happen within a person's life and within a team to create excellence. And sometimes those things don't really go together. Sometimes people can be so focused on growth that they, deny relationships, or even so focused on excellence that they deny relationships, and then vice versa. They can be so focused on people that they're not so concerned about personal growth and excellence. How did Anthony? He seemed to be a master at balancing those two priorities. In your opinion, how did he do that?
Absolutely. I feel like I keep using several different terms to describe him, but I just think it's so just relevant and accurate that he was so intentional. And I think that's a key
Yeah,
element here when it comes to just any level of success in life and family and ministry, just a certain intentionality, doing something. And it may be a little bit different for everybody. There's a lot of different options out there when it comes to personal growth, balancing relationships, but just being intentional about it and doing something when it comes to just a daily practical application of these kinds of principles. And for Anthony, he was intentional. I think there was a certain sense of humility, and humility is really, really tough for most of us. And
mm-hmm.
it's a challenging
Yeah,
thing, especially the biblical concept of humility. But I think that came through with Anthony for somebody who was so talented, uh, for somebody who had so many abilities to preach and sing and play instruments and lead organizations and all these things, but incredible humility. There was never any arrogance, never any look at me. And so I think that was the foundation for his life. And then you start
yeah,
to add onto that a clear understanding of purpose. And when it
mm-hmm.
comes to priorities and values and how we manage these things, in fact, there's the opening uh, section of the book is vision and values. And he had a very clear vision for his life and an understanding of his values that enabled him to prioritize the right things at the right time. And that's the first two
Yeah,
chapters in this book are priorities and purpose. And so he knew his purpose, which enabled him to then live it out. And I go back to something I said
yeah,
earlier, that people were always the vision. People were always the focus of his intentionality. And all of his values revolved around relationships and outcomes that would impact people. And so I think
that's
that's
so
how he
good.
struck that balance, is that he realized that my personal growth is only valuable if it helps somebody else, if it impacts somebody else, if it helps me achieve
Mm.
my vision to make an eternal impact in another life. And so it kept him from getting self-consumed, which I think uh, can be a real problem for a leader. Self-awareness is powerful. Being self-consumed is so destructive. And so the balance between the two is being able to be self-aware without being self-consumed. And that happens when we know our purpose and when people are our vision. And we recognize that any personal growth that I have, it's got to connect me to greater impact in the life of somebody else. And I think if we can achieve that, then we can strike that balance between personal investment, because you have to be a little bit selfish if you're going to take time to go back to school and get a master's degree. If you're going to spend time reading and bettering yourself, if you're going to spend time in uh,
Yeah,
leadership development and training and all of those things that you have to give yourself to if you're going to be better and do better. But it can't be about us. It can't be self-focused. It's got to be about others. And that helps us not to get lost in that world of just, okay, I'm consumed about increasing my capacity. But if that capacity is not connected to the outcome of ministering to people, then we've lost our way.
that's so good. I love the way you brought out that he had such a clear vision for life, and I can't wait to read that in the book, um, because a lot of people struggle to develop that personal vision, and when they don't have that personal vision, all of the other things they do is it's hard to connect that to something significant. You can connect some things, but is your life holistically revolving around something significant, around relationships and kingdom impact. When you have that clear vision, in fact, it's one of the main pillars or the main parts of establishing a better rhythm of life in the Christian Leader Blueprint. And I hear when I'm hearing you unpack his life here with us today, I'm hearing a lot of the components of the Christian Leader Blueprint. And it sounds like Anthony was he didn't need my book. He was writing that book with his life for sure. So I think you've kind of already went here, but I just want to check in with you and see, is there any additional things about Anthony's legacy that, would represent, that would be significant for leaders and individuals that are striving for personal and professional development? His legacy and the things that you took away from his life. Is there anything else that you'd like to add there?
Absolutely. I think something that speaks to all of us is to spend our time, spend our lives investing in people and things that will outlive us. And I think that for me is this incredible testimony of Anthony's legacy is the impact that he is continuing to have. His family just recently released a song of Anthony and his father that they just recorded. Anthony's part was already recorded, and his father, Tom Trimble, just through the wonders of modern technology, they take that and they master this song and produce it and release it. And thank God for technology through video and audio, his preaching, his music, all those things that live on now in this book. So something we haven't touched on yet, but the ongoing legacy of Anthony is that he's got 3 boys, Kingston, Davis, and Graham, who are amazing young men. And I believe they're going to do great things for God, and they will be part of his legacy. And this book is dedicated to them. And there's things in this book that they're going to get to read, especially as they get older, that they'll understand more fully the impact that their father had. And I hope that they get to know their dad just a little bit better through this book. And 100% of the proceeds of this book are going to missions and ministry. And specifically, initially, the proceeds are going to go toward a scholarship fund for his 3 boys. And that's a very, very special part of this project. And I believe it speaks
anybody
to
listening
that
right
legacy.
now. Anybody listening right now should hear that and want to go buy the book, a couple of the books, give them to your friends, just for the fact that the proceeds are going to something significant that is going to help Anthony's family, and that is just tremendous. So hats off to you for what you're doing there and helping his boys, not only creating the book that gives something for them to reflect on in Anthony's life, but also to go towards a college fund. That's tremendous.
Well, it was something that was very important to me and all the authors from the beginning. None of us are going to profit from this. This is his story. It's his life. It's his legacy. And everything that would come in monetarily from this book is going to be invested in his family and in ongoing ministry that will take place because of his life. And I think that is the challenge for all of us, is to do things that will live on. And whether it's writing a song or writing a book or just investing in a relationship, especially the generations coming on behind us, because that legacy then lives on and continues to impact so many others.
For sure. For sure. Well, before we wrap up here, anything else you'd like to share? And I in just a moment, I'd love for you to share where people can buy the book and any other details like that you would like to share.
Well, just to kind of wrap up as far as Anthony's life, just I would say key principles for success that he lived out. He genuinely cared about people. It just came through in everything that he did. That passion and focus for personal growth, striving for excellence, but never doing so at the expense of people. Something that my wife has reminded me of at times. I can get a little focused on the details and the minutia and the organizational structure and all those things, but people are always more important than things. And I think that's a principle that
Mm-hmm.
that Anthony lived out, that everything he did was, it's always in service of the vision to invest in others, to help others. Howard Bayer, the author of the book, It's Not About Coffee, I think he was a Starbucks executive, said, "We're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee." And I think that's just a
Yeah.
powerful statement that really applies in Anthony's life and who he was, that everything was always about people. So, yes, get coffee with Anthony, life lessons from Anthony Trimble. It would be such a blessing to his legacy for you to do that. But I know it's going to be a blessing to you. You're going to be so inspired and challenged by his life. Each chapter of the book has a section that concludes with practical application to live like Anthony. And so we tried to take these 10 life lessons and make them very practical, tangible, something that's achievable for everybody. And so each of those chapters conclude with that practical application: live like Anthony. And the book is available on Amazon. You can get the ebook. It's also available in paperback form. And then for those that want to buy in bulk, we've had several churches, thankfully, some that have bought 150, some that have bought 100, that they want to give it to every man in their church. They want to sell it to their church. And so if you want to buy in bulk, I encourage you to go to michaelensey.com, and there's a store there. And the reason that I say that is just because we get to keep a larger percentage of the proceeds if you buy directly through my website as opposed to Amazon. And so it is available through Amazon. If you're buying just a handful, then certainly that's a convenient route to go. But if you want to buy 10, 20, 50, 100 or more, then I encourage you to go to michaelensey.com, click on the store, and you can purchase the book there.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone that's listening right now will go out and support and buy a book and actually read it and learn the life lessons that Anthony has given through his life. Tremendous things. So I'm going to throw this question at you. I did not prepare you for this, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. But I normally I end every podcast with one thing that you wish you could tell your younger self. We did that with you back in, I think it was January or so. But what's one thing that you think that Anthony could would want to tell his younger self?
That's a powerful question. And I think something that has to be expressed from his life, knowing that he passed away at the age of 35 and 3 young
Mm-hmm.
kids, his wife, family, ministry, what we might feel like and think, man, his life was cut short, and yet we trust God, we trust the providence of God, we trust the wisdom of God. But it also underscores for me the importance of making the most of every day. And I think if
Yeah.
Anthony could tell us anything today, it would be make the most of this day. Love your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, your family, your church family. Spend time with them. You're never going to regret investing in relationships. You're never going to you're never going to regret the time that you spend investing in those relationships and investing in eternal things. And I think that if Anthony could speak to us today, that's the powerful message that he would share with all of us, is to live like there's no tomorrow and make the most of this day
Yeah.
and the opportunities that we have to love each other, to invest in a relationship. If we need to forgive somebody, if we need to get over some hurt, if we need to let go of something from the past, to do that today, because we're not promised tomorrow. And I think
Yeah.
that's a message that he would speak to us.
And I imagine that he'd probably tell you to slow down and go have coffee with a friend, right?
That's it. That's right. Call somebody, text somebody,
So,
tell them, hey, let's get together and have some coffee.
yeah, absolutely. So, I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes, but can you tell the audience one more time what your website is so they can go and make those purchases?
Absolutely. They can certainly purchase from Amazon. You can just search Coffee with Anthony or search the author, Michael Ensey. And then my personal ministry website, which is a new ministry website I've just launched, and it'll be further developed, but it's a source for just ministry resources that I'm starting to put together. And on that website, michaelensey.com, you can go there and you can find the store where you can purchase Coffee with Anthony. Certainly, if you're going to be buying in bulk, I encourage you to go to that website to purchase the book.
Well, Michael, this has been a tremendous conversation. Such a pleasure to have you on today. And this concludes our show. And if you're a new listener, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to audio podcast or on YouTube. And also, it would just make my day if you would take a minute to rate the show and write a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us on the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.